I'm gonna make this video about the importance of meditating. I'm just gonna start it right now because the more free-flowing the ideas are, the better. And I've ultimately realized that I can make videos that cater to what people want now, or I think they want now, or I can just make videos talking my mind, which is a different train of thought entirely. So if you ever try to make a video, well, talk about myself. When I try to make videos and I'm trying to communicate something in particular, I find it generally worse than when I'm just talking. And I love talking for the sake of talking, but it's not talking for the sake of talking, it's really talking for the sake of thinking. Just talking and thinking are, like, thinking is one mode of thinking in your head. There's different types of thinking in your head. Talking is another type of thinking. Talking to a person, talking to a loved one, lecturing. Jordan Peterson lectures very well because he has a lot of practice lecturing. And lecturing is a certain kind of thinking where you're paying attention to your audience, but I can't pay attention to you because you are fundamentally elsewhere, and it's kind of unnerving. There's like someone behind me. There's like people all around me. I guess I can open up my door, and then I can open up the other door to form a natural barrier. Yeah, this is really unnerving, like having this 24-hour ATM here. I guess I could like withdraw my knife so I can just. Has anyone tried to come grab my cash because I like my cash? No return card. No receipt. Give me my card. Roll the window up. Doors are locked. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180, 200, 220, 240, 260, 280, 300, 320, 340, 360, 380, 400, 420, 440, 460, 480, 500. That's beautiful. But I can't even check my balance right now, so I actually kind of wish I'd gotten the receipt because the balance. Where did I put my wallet? I put my wallet back in there. Yeah, I did. So can't even check the balance because my phone deactivated my phone when I had my new phone activated accidentally. When I had my mother pick that up at the mall because they gave me the wrong phone the first time. I didn't have time to get it because I needed to do stuff for the business. So my mom was going to the mall anyway. She's like, "Oh, let's go pick it up for you," but they activated it. Holy shit, it's a fat lot of bills. It's gonna like fuck up my bill clip. I wonder if I could just deposit some of the excess cash, like the lower denomination stuff, so my bill clip isn't completely 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, gotta figure out a better way to store my cash. I guess I could just fold it once and do a one-time fold for this bill clip thing. I just have the problem is I have this bill clip wallet that I just have fat wads of bills. It doesn't work well with fat wads of bills. carrying cash is a little paranoia inducing. I'm gonna move out of here. I'm gonna meditate so someone else can use this beautiful ATM machine. So, yeah, carrying a lot of cash is definitely, I don't know, you gotta like keep track of your money. Your money's gonna abandon you. I think someone said that your money is like a woman. If you don't pay attention to her, she's gonna leave you. If you don't know how much money you got, if you don't pay attention to that stuff, your money will abandon you. A lot of it is just accounting. I've realized that the system is mostly set up. This is why I don't want to just talk. And this wallet, effing wallet, these bill clip things are nonsense. They're not made to last. It's kind of cheap. Whatever. I realize that. I will definitely get another wallet. We'll get something nice. But like a lot of the wallets out there, leather wallets, are just kind of BS. Like a nice leather wallet. I would love a nice classic leather wallet. That's something I'm going to look into. I'm going to get myself a very nice classic leather wallet. I'm going to store my money in that. Because that's efficiency. It's like this efficient thing. And inefficiency is like expending too much energy. Expending too much energy is the essence of poor posture and poor form ultimately in combat sports, because the entire purpose of the combat sport is to increase the amount of time that's being expended by your opponent in the form of resources that cost him time, like oxygen to replenish, ATP, all these sorts of things. So, like for instance in jiu-jitsu, if I'm trying to beat someone who's much larger than me, I have to make him make a serious mistake, which constitutes a lapse in time, for a variety of reasons. But time is the currency of fighting, ultimately. I mean, even like if I kill you, I take away time. If I cripple you, I increase the amount of time it takes you to do the things you normally wouldn't do. If I put you in a bad position, I now increase the amount of time or energy, which is also time, that you will have to expend in order to get out of that position. It's the same as in business. Businesses get destroyed when they overextend, they outcompete, they don't understand the essence of what business is. And as a result, which might be cities, it might be the founding of cities. I'll have to look into that. I mean, this is something that I try and understand more of as well. And I've come to realize I think I can't become greater than my base. So ultimately, my viewership, form part of my base. My wife and brother form another part of my base, as basically my two most employees who are legally bound to me and I to them, which is interesting. Like marriage and business have made me think a lot differently about relationships, because people just come and go, but it's like when you get like legally and genetically bound with people, it's just this different game where now you I like having a fat wad of cash. It's a nice feeling. But now I don't want to like lose it. I don't want to like misplace my fat wad of cash. So I have to have more organizational systems for cash. And this wallet, it's built for high denominational bills. I don't know why it gave it to me in 20s. I didn't ask the ATM to give it to me in 20s. Just gave it to me in 20s for whatever reason. I didn't even ask it to give it to me in 20s. It just did. So right now, I'm actually recording this on my old iPhone. This is probably one of the last videos I recorded on my old iPhone before I got the Galaxy. Galaxy security. Security is interesting. I wonder about the security of the iPhone. I've come to realize that by making long-form videos that aren't edited for entertainment, because I'm paranoid. So I'm like, I don't want to communicate to my enemies, of which I do have some enemies. I have people who resent me for whatever reason and would love to try to steal my success. I don't really think I have enemies. Like in some way, I think of everyone as my friend. Because if you're not actively trying to murder me, then to some degree, because if you're completely, this is my thought process. The worst part of human beings is the part of human beings that doesn't care about self-destruction for the sake of destroying someone else. So you're like, I don't care about my own potential. I don't care about anything. I'm just gonna go destroy someone else for the sake of pure and unmitigated resentment that is actually so deep and profound that I will literally cause complete and utter destruction to my own being in order to destroy you, because fuck you. Like, that's I think that's kind of like the worst of human beings, because ultimately what you're doing. So here's the thing on the on water. I was drinking water out of Poland Spring and I developed a stuffy nose. And then I get a gallon of spring water from an actual spring that I go to, and the stuffy nose immediately goes away. Water quality is so important, so I'm gonna go to the spring again and fill it up, even though it's 29 degrees out and temperature dropping and misting out, because that's really important. So that gets me to another point of efficiency. So I'm just gonna actually continue on my errands, and ultimately I'm going to get some cartridges, because I do use THC and CBD cartridges. I'll just reveal that here. I like to reveal things in more longer form videos, because I feel like if you actually give a shit to like watch the long videos, I don't mind being more open, because again, like, I don't know, I'm like, are people gonna study me? I mean, ultimately, so I get live resin cartridges, or rosin, because those are just the best cartridges, and I ultimately don't want to like poison myself, so I'm gonna just consume the highest quality stuff that I can possibly consume. So I recommend everyone does that as well, though I'm actually going to get a vaporizer and move to vaporizing, though really what I'm doing is I'm moving on to phenylparacetam from Adderall, because we're alternating between them in a way of reducing my tolerance to Adderall and increasing sensitivity to the NMDA receptor and the dopamine transport chain, while keeping my high-level brain function pretty much the same. Probably only keep like $200 on me, because I only really need $200. I'll keep talking because I'm on a train, so that is enjoyable. So voila, take that cash, store that elsewhere. I can probably just put it elsewhere in my wallet, just fold it up differently. I get a new wallet. This is a Travado wallet. It's kind of I'll just show you guys. Like, it's a clip wallet. They kind of suck, I found out, but whatever. I decided to use it. I'm down to use things, try new things, see what actually sucks, what actually doesn't suck, and report back to you guys to varying degrees. But basically what I realized is that my wallet is just stuffed full of cash, and there is a silver coin I keep in my wallet in case I die spontaneously, so I have crossing for the river in the Greek land of the dead. It's just something I've been doing forever. Do I believe in that stuff? I don't know. I mean, it's in Dante, it's in his Dark Materials, it's in I think it transcends Christian and pagan thought. I think it's just simply the architecture of the human psyche, which itself is the architecture of reality. So, but ultimately though, I am like gonna quit smoking weed. It's just literally this stupid fucking thing I just keep doing. It's the dumbest thing I do presently, but I don't masturbate or watch porn or fucking anything, except for smoke marijuana, vaporized in, and then I like research. I like to buy in bulk specific strains. I'm just gonna leave this going as I have green tea too. Love to drink green tea as well. Green tea and weed, you know. I was on a mushroom trip over a year ago, and I was thinking, on the mushroom trip, I had this idea that I was kind of fighting my natural inclinations, and that if I really just, because I was like kind of drinking a bit at the time, and that's kind of related to like why I had the cavities, and this is before the insomnia kicked in. I was trying to like rid myself of all my bad habits. I was like, oh no, I was confused. I didn't recognize that my instinct was the best part of me, and that I needed to trust my instincts more. And that ultimately trusting my instincts meant trusting my instinct not only to like take Adderall, take phenylparacetam, take caffeine, because I was like, I don't want to take caffeine, I don't want to like take supplements at high doses like I was taking, like that's like I'm just gonna trust the common will. Like it's just mediocre thinking, because I wasn't taking the time to encode my ideas in journaling. And journaling is a different form of thinking. Like talking, like I was saying earlier, is a form of thinking. And that's just what I'm doing right now, is I'm talking to myself. I'm lecturing in a way that engages me so that I can ultimately dig my own thoughts out of the frozen ocean of my own psyche in a way that's enjoyable to me, kind of following that dopamine drip that leads you to nirvana, that kind of Ariadne's thread of psychology. The Wing Mercurius, the Golden Snitch, which is Ariadne's thread as well. Jordan Peterson, cheers to you. But, which is also Mercury, the ring messenger of the gods, in the Odyssey appears. They said, and actually they said this in the Odyssey. They said to the guy who killed, what's his face, Agamemnon's wife, Aegisthus, that the gods appeared to him as the winged flash of Hermes. Just as a momentary thought. And they were like, yeah, we gave him a momentary thought telling him it was a bad idea, but he did it anyway. And since I read that, I actually became terrified, because that corresponds to the idea in the Bible where Jesus is like, it's like the quick and the dead. That's a quote from the Bible. You'll still come to separate like the quick from the dead. And quicken is associated with life, the word quicken. Jesus says, whoever puts his hand back, whoever being called puts his hand to the plow is not, like, turns away for a moment, is not worthy of the kingdom of heaven. And I realized that it's I just started doing it. It wasn't even a realization. I just became terrified, because I'm like, anytime the ancient Greeks and the ancient Israelites in the New Testament agree, I'm like the wife of Lot turning into a pillar of salt as they fled the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Anytime that they agree, anytime there's that momentary thought that you must immediately listen to, and that's embodied in Odysseus, who's constantly planning, because he has a relationship with Minerva, who's related to the same Minerva that Balthazar Gratian talks about in his book, the El Discreto, which I think is ultimately kind of a lower metabolism book. I mean, I don't know. The guy's very wise, but I prefer Pocket Mirror for Heroes because it's more expansive. But I'm also 25, so that's probably just the stage of life I'm at. But, like, who the heck knows? Because it's all, like, stages you go through as well. And you have to, like, trust in that. Like, I had to kind of, like, separate myself from my family without even realizing I was doing so. And then I realized the, like, intrinsic need for my family and my family's need for me. And I was like the prodigal son. I was like, I've sinned against heaven and against earth. Like, I should have, it was unknowing, but it's like I left my family structure, and I should have been supporting my family structure more consciously, but I didn't know how to, and didn't even realize, like, and then I left, and then I was like, oh, like, I actually, like, want to be near my family, because I just miss them, and I realized, like, I can't integrate myself into my extended family, but through my immediate family. And they can't even do that either. It's kind of like built into the structure of traffic and everything. It was just this whole thing. I was like, oh my God, traffic and children. Like, traffic and children basically changed my complete understanding of the world. I was like, wait, when you have children, you have certain things you need to do throughout the day, and they nap, and there's traffic. Like, it's like literally children napping and traffic patterns dictate your day, and now you can't see other people whose days are dictated by work, which is also dictated by napping and traffic patterns. And then you're like, oh my God, and you're just in the system. And then I realized today also that slavery itself is the degree to which you rely on your societal, because, like, for instance, like, my father relies on people, but he also relies on me. And when I was like, at one point I was like, oh, like, I need to, like, work on my own business stuff. I can't be, like, making my father's business a priority, because, like, that's his business. And then I realized, I was like, but then he's gonna hire other people to do that. And then, like, he basically is giving away his business. And then, like, whoever doesn't gather scatters to the four winds. That's what Jesus says. And I'm like, so if I don't help him with the business, then someone else is going to. But that's not his son. Like, they don't love him the way I do. Like, would they die for my dad? Like, I don't know. My dad would die for me. And that, like, that means the world to me. Like, he would die for me. Like, my friends wouldn't. Like, they abandon me. They'll abandon you when things get really hard. Like, some friends won't, but, like, you don't really know. But, like, I know my father's character enough, but, like, I know he would die for me. I'm like, holy cow, like, I would die for him. And I'm like, wow. And it's like, so why wouldn't I help him make his problems my problems? It's like, I love The Godfather says that in Mario Puzo's Godfather. He said, like, if you had made me your friend, He says this to Enzo, or the guy in the beginning who, like, his daughter gets, like, raped and beat, or not raped, but, like, beaten up by the thugs, and, like, he's like, if you had been my friend, then your problems would have been my problems, your enemies, my resources, your resources. Like, and that's how I feel. It's like, if you're my friend, your enemies are my enemies, your problems are my problems, my resources are your resources. And your resources should, to a degree, be my resources, and we should work together, and we should talk, and, like, that is nation building at its utmost. That is the thing that made the United States great, is the ability for people to do this and work together so that I can trust you enough and know you enough to the point where, and that takes uncomfortable conversations, but that's, like, your job as, like, a sibling, especially an older sibling, and, like, a father and, like, a member of a family, is to have those conversations to keep your family together. Because otherwise, it basically, then you become a part of a business, which becomes a mechanism for having difficult conversations, like the "you're fired" conversation. It's like, oh, the business will have the hard conversation with you, but you won't have the hard conversation with your own family member. And that's why you end up relying on the business more emotionally, and everyone does, and the systems rely more on the business emotionally for the truthful conveyance of information, and therefore the systems of conveying information, which convey the resources that guide people to make the decisions they make that end up becoming their lives, become dependent on relationships governed by the rules of society and business, in which point all of us are subject to the people who are most competitive in business, and then business becomes subject to the whims of government, unless it has this competition of family. But the family competition needs to ultimately be legal, and everyone should ultimately be trying to own banks so we can topple the banking cartel. Oh God, they're gonna kill me. Fucking Christ. Whatever. I don't know. I'll have to make longer videos. Don't kill me, guys. I mean, ultimately, if you're gonna try to kill me for this, I'll make a case of why the banking cartel shouldn't kill me for this information. Ultimately, the dispersal of information is governed by attention, and if you do not allow information to disperse based on books, lectures, anything that requires long-term attention and thought, then you will ultimately relegate yourselves to a type of nepotism that relies purely on connection and heredity and not on the ability to think, and therefore you will not be able to select for your mates, for your family, and for the nepotistic structures, the people who are the best and brightest, who emerge as emergent properties from the substructure of the society that also consists of the language unit, of which you also participate in through the use of language, and therefore your genetic lines will not represent a peak of history. Therefore you will end up subsiding into history as not a peak of culture, but a trough of culture that deteriorates just as Rome deteriorated and re-emerged at a peak of culture that ultimately embodied its ideals better through not suppressing the natural cycling of human ideas through the subversive murder of those who would convey ideas truthfully, not to spitefully hurt those who are ahead of them in the manner of the communists who would murder you in the streets, but in the manner of one who desires competition as a wrestler, who simply seeks to teach others his moves so he can be a peak of an ultimately widening base of those who have attention and discipline, so that his peak of attention and discipline can represent a larger peak than comes before, presenting more production to society in the manner that Ford talks about, to outstrip the despotism that produces poverty, such that the wealth of people may increase as a result of the increase in our ability to produce, by an increase in our efficiency and efficacy of our actions, in the same manner that I am producing more efficiency and efficacy in my actions by increasing the efficiency and efficacy of my thoughts, by taking care of my health, by going and getting water, by improving the quality of the foods and substances I consume, in the manner in which I consume them, so that I can communicate all of this stuff in the form of systems to you via YouTube videos that you can consume in these long form videos that you can therefore use in order to live longer, which is what you all want. I know what you elites all want. You always want to live longer, just like the Chinese emperors. I actually think I have the means to do that, but it's governed by attention. You have to have the attention span and discipline to pay attention to these ideas long enough to learn them so you can implement them. Ultimately, I haven't even been able to successfully teach them my own brother, who I've been trying to out of love and compassion, because I've realized that if I can't help my own, like I don't know, I guess my father just instilled in me that, like, I need to, like, love and care for my younger siblings to a really great degree. So I represent this unit of his willpower, and then my brother does as well. And I think my sister will ultimately come into the fold, even though she's kind of doing her own thing, because I think my father's will is ultimately incredibly strong and is manifesting itself now in the continuity of the unity of our family working together towards the goal of which my father always expressed that he wanted to do in the form of selling like something like a supplement powder, which he ultimately purchased for a lower amount, then sold for a higher amount. But again, so I do this with the highest purity and manufacturing means within 40 principles so that I can continue. You guys will ultimately see that my pricing structure is created in the longest term so that I don't even benefit from talking about this because no one even watches these videos in the long term. It's probably won't even be watched till 3 years from now, at which point I've already built structures that allow the company to succeed for longer than 3 years because I've realized that staying power in the manner of efficiency, as I described, like the pattern of jiu-jitsu that I was describing earlier, that's the reason I like to practice jiu-jitsu and these grappling arts, because it allows me to test these ideas ultimately so I can allow the wisdom of my body in the Nietzschean sense to express itself in the highest manner through the linguistic ability to express these ideas, the manner that titillates me the most through dopamine, through these YouTube videos, so ultimately I can lecture to myself and make this a productive means of time so that I can read all the greatest ideas of history and converse via YouTube, via myself, via talking about this stuff, allow you guys to read this stuff, see this stuff, and then ultimately this forms a base and latency of ideas that is ultimately forming a competitive advantage that I'm already starting to reap because my YouTube channel is 3 years old. So the ideas that I was expressing 3 years ago are now starting to be seen on a wider scale because YouTube, being an ultimately conservative network, is optimizing my videos for the longest term performance. And because it's optimizing them for the longest term performance, I'm starting to get cramps in my hands, which leaves ultimately due to I'm taking a lot of vitamins, and I know I wouldn't have this issue if I had meditated, because meditating, funnily enough, actually increases HPA axis regulation to the degree to which it allows me to feel lessening cramps in my body because I have more effective dispersal of nutrients and minerals and vitamins throughout my circulatory system via the proper regulation of my body, talking in a manner that also stimulates me as well. Like I have to work to a point where doing this actually stimulates my winner effect, because I'm not just talking to myself, and because I'm probably not going to watch this video in the future, because it ultimately represents a means of getting me to think at a higher level, which gets the ideas into my brain in a way that they will come out in my journaling so that I can ultimately weave them into the written story of my life that is made concrete by my journaling and limited by the fact that my hand will literally cramp if I try to write too much, which is a benefit of handwriting over typing, and that just simply requires more consciousness and slows me down, though I don't want to write without lines on paper, though I have tried that because I've tried everything. Because I've been doing this for a long time, even though that does also slow me down further, though I kind of go between them. It's just sort of like noticing these patterns because it's something that I tend to do. But even that, though, me journaling is simply something that my grandfather and even father encouraged me to do my entire life by buying me journals and simply encouraging me to journal and always encouraging me to journal and write down my ideas on such a consistent basis that I just started doing that. My father got me a journal for I don't know how many of my birthdays, just all my birthdays basically, until I just started journaling. He didn't even ever force me to journal. He just get me nice journals, and then the journal he got me became my first journal after I started writing poetry in it, but then ripped out the poetry and burned the poetry, because he used to burn a lot of the stuff I wrote down because I guess I hadn't built enough of a relationship with myself that I don't know, it was just it was too real. I didn't even read my journals that much, but I like having them there because I do reread them from time to time, but whenever I do, I'm kind of forced to level up because it's just so much concentrated consciousness because you have to write it down. It takes so much effort that it itself forms a natural distillation of ideas, because writing an idea, actually writing an idea down, I've realized, is good because it's inherently creative, and expressing an idea in the form of a video like this and then uploading it to YouTube is also inherently creative. Even making the video is, but if you just make the videos and then never watch them, I mean, I did that kind of at first because that was how I journal, but then I just like to journal, and I encourage anyone to journal, because when you journal, you force yourself over time. It's a habit that you have to do for years ultimately before it starts to really give you the massive benefits that's capable of. But once you can do that, it's like Brian Tracy talks about written goals and stuff, and all these systems are just trying to get you to write down your thoughts. Every system of organization I've realized is inferior to journaling, because journaling just gets me to write down my thoughts in a way that I can actually talk right now, and it feels completely coherent and natural to me because I've sort of already written down the ideas in a way that my brain can reflexively refer to them, so that me talking and then writing forms a dialogue between two types of thought, and then me talking to other people and then expressing the ideas on YouTube forms another type of dialogue, because I've realized that there's a certain way that I need to talk on YouTube that actually benefits me and benefits the people who watch my YouTube videos, so that I can actually produce the highest quality YouTube videos in a manner that corresponds with the nature of the production, because I'm not making highly edited YouTube videos, because I think that that's a diminishment of the power of the technology, because ultimately the ability of YouTube is sort of like the ability of the printing press, and I believe that the ultimate power of human beings is sort of deterministic in a scientific way. I was thinking about this earlier. Like, my father read a lot of science fiction. I want to read the science fiction he read, because I think it probably led him to his determinations about the futility of a lot of philosophy, because ultimately I believe that a lot of the highest philosophy of man was likely explored within science fiction, because we ultimately write fiction in order to explore ideas by simulating different versions of humanity. And science fiction is a very novel form of idea, because you ultimately have science fiction forming and this is why I start the video this way, because the only way I can get into this sort of a train of thought is if I'm journaling, or if I start, and like, I don't know where I'm going with I'm journaling. I have to create space for the idea in the form of like open car ride, long form video, just talking, and then stuff just starts coming out, because it's all connected in the form of action and embodiment of a human being in language as it flows, because the flow of language is embodied in the action of human beings, because what we act is what we believe, and what we believe is encoded in language has become more and more truthful since the incarnation of God, because I believe one of the things that's the most profound since the incarnation of God is the fact that we've actually changed our linguistic structure via the widespread dissemination of the biblical text and the translations thereof, so that the biblical text formed a large degree of influence in the formation of German, English, and Russian, which are the primary, a lot of the primary languages, and also the other Romance languages, if you're looking at the history of the languages, so that you can actually say that the fundamental beliefs of Christianity have become encoded into the linguistic structure, and that the evidence of this is that we can now express truth more precisely, because the incarnation of God is fundamentally an increase in the human being's ability to express truth, because of our knowledge of the concrete example of the life of Jesus Christ, who manifested to us in the form of a story, because stories are the fundamental unit of understanding of the human nervous system as explored by Jung and talked about by Jordan Peterson, and the psychological tradition that emerged from the study of the biblical corpus, as Peterson documents throughout his biblical series. And that one of the results of this is the ability of language to incorporate such disparate ideas within one singular unit, such that we can actually express scientific ideas within the unity of mathematics, which is something my father actually expressed to me that was very profound. He said that if you cannot express an idea mathematically, then your knowledge of that idea is of a limited and useless nature. I hope that I'm not going to get pulled over by the cops right now, because that'd be really irritating, because the cops just pulled around, but whatever. But if you can't express an idea mathematically, your understanding of the idea is ultimately of a limited and useless nature. And I actually agree with him. I mean, he's never been like a dick about this, because I don't know, he's pretty chill in that way, but basically, that's just one thing he said. He just would say that, and he always insisted that we learn math, and then, he kind of just dropped it. I mean, he always like wanted us to really take a like mathematical and scientific approach to college, and then I went to school for like psychology, but psychology is a science, and the car's getting hot right now, it's kind of like making me nauseous. Hit some CBD, because CBD makes me feel less nauseous. But ultimately, the insistence that ideas be expressed mathematically, I've noticed, is profoundly useful, because if you can't express an idea mathematically, it really means your linguistic understanding of it is not concrete, because mathematics is simply concretized language. So I've even been playing around with expressing a lot of psychological ideas mathematically. My friend from high school and I did that a lot as well, expressing psychological ideas mathematically. I've done that with like the cell, and I've done it in a way where I'm sort of like doing it like the ideal gas law, and trying to apply a statistical and general approach to the 80-20 power laws of the most relevant information that you're trying to gain via that method of observation in a manner that will encourage further mathematical inquiry such that we can express the laws of biology mathematically, because I ultimately think that metabolism should be able to be expressed mathematically. And Ray Pete was interested in this as well, because he believed mathematics. We believe that metabolism was ultimately the same as the metabolism and economy of a society, which I agree with, because I don't think a society can, like, society is just the behavior of people, and economy is the behavior of people, so we can't ultimately behave beyond our metabolism, and our metabolism depends on our psychology, because our psychology determines our HPA axis to an indeterminate degree, which basically regulates our bacteria, but then it also regulates our ability to, like, I wonder if our plumbing system, like, is highly toxic and conveying mold to people's houses, and like that's conveyed through a lot of ideas in the collective unconscious, like it. And there's like, oh my god, what's like the hidden thing growing in the subway system, Gregor the Overlander, freaking Harry Potter. There's so much literature in which the collective unconscious is trying to express the idea of something within the plumbing system that is conveying sickness to people, and I wonder if that is ultimately mold that is growing within the plumbing system, that we ultimately need to create some sort of innovation in chemistry that will allow us to eliminate mold and mildew and other toxins like that from our sewer systems, so that we don't have circulation like waterways conveying these things into people's houses to an indeterminate degree, because I just feel like that's probably a big thing. Because I noticed that when I drink tap water, holy cow, I feel that. So ultimately, one way I can increase the efficiency of society and of people is by, this is ultimately, again, forming a latency effect because of attention, because you can't pay attention to that many things simultaneously. So ultimately, if you encounter my YouTube channel, you encounter the other YouTube channels of other people with lots of videos out, then their videos will ultimately form a optimization network, because you're like, oh my god, there's so many videos, and then you don't watch the videos, and then you get to know the people slower, so you ultimately understand them slower. But then once you start to understand them, you start to watch more of their videos, and then you become accustomed to watching a certain type of video, so that you watch more and more and more of that type of video. Because I've realized that people don't compare videos to other videos, they compare videos to the other videos that other people have created, because the idea of making videos is basically a new technology. We don't really understand what the efficacy of it is yet, but I believe the efficacy of it is the ability to convey speech faster, because that allows the faster dissemination of ideas than the printing press did earlier. And now we can basically capture ideas in a free-flowing manner the way we never could before, such that people with longer form attention spans can actually consume these ideas while they're driving, which will allow them to basically filter through these ideas in a massive way, such that YouTube, being the conservative network it is, conservative in the manner that optimizes for long-term performance, will optimize for the longest-term performance of the best ideas, such that societies that allow for the dissemination of the best long-form content will ultimately perform better, such that things like psilocybin will ultimately become legal in the best manner possible, because Terrence McKenna and other people who advocate for the legalization of things in more intelligent manners will ultimately have their ideas disseminated, because they're not traveling around the country simply trying to dose everyone. They're disseminating the ideas in a manner that people who become interested in the ideas can ultimately find out about the ideas in a manner that their interest demands, such that people who follow their interest the most will ultimately have access to the highest quality ideas. I gotta pay attention to the GPS, because I'm really not doing this effectively. And therefore, having access to the highest quality ideas will outperform other people, so that people who use psilocybin, phenylpiracetam, and ultimately adopt the methods that I advocate in my videos. So again, people who have higher attention spans, such that they can actually go through my videos and find the videos that have the best information that's relevant to them, and then use those as databases that allow them to search out other information that's relevant to them, such that I've optimized my videos for this kind of free associative thing. Because I realized that people use videos as databases for ideas, because you can just go through my videos and then find all the ideas that I'm using in order to better myself, because I'm ultimately an embodiment of a certain goal motivational structure, because all people kind of want the same thing. Therefore, there's a central tendency to the ideas that I'm using, such that there's going to be a certain degree of people who resonate with the ideas that I'm using, because the ideas of their own nature reconcile within my individual, which is the conjunction of the conditions that I emerged out of my biology, which you ultimately share a lot of, presents a series of solutions to problems that are ultimately common, such that you can simulate, such that I'm looking at fiction in a manner of simulating the ideas, and that you can look at people on YouTube So I basically read all of the best books that have ever been written that simulate ideas, then I act them out in my business and in my life. And this gives me a competitive advantage. And then I make videos about it so as to give competitive advantage to other people who watch YouTube videos, so that you can watch these videos and get a competitive advantage via your faster metabolism of the best ideas in society, because society and warfare itself even runs on ideas, as Nietzsche talks about. So if you can assimilate the best ideas faster, and I can play a role in your assimilation of the best ideas faster, and I can do that through the free association of the ideas, and it doesn't even matter. I mean, I'm assimilating the ideas in a way that helps me, and then putting them out there so that ultimately when I perform the best, people will want to copy my performance, and then they will go back and watch the videos that I've made to copy my performance, such that me making the videos now and then saving the best videos that I've ever made to hard drives and uploading them on every single platform that search optimizes and browser optimizes for the presentation of the most optimal videos for people, because I mean, holy cow, is YouTube good at doing that. I'll ultimately make documentaries, all of these things. So I'm telling all of you guys this so that you can use this information to better yourselves, because I'm ultimately realizing that I'm not going to put myself at a competitive disadvantage, because there's no way for the information to get out fast enough such that I would put myself at a competitive disadvantage, because my own metabolism of these ideas is ultimately going to be far ahead of my ability to express them. So I'm ultimately increasing my ability to understand these ideas by expressing them to you guys, really myself, in the manner that I am now, such that I can then journal about them in a more effective way, making more effective business plans, acting on those more effective business plans, which will ultimately lead to my success in the creation of systems that will produce success for me and my family consistently over a long period of time in the widest variety of circumstances, such that I can continue to form a platform for myself to continue to consume the best ideas and talk to the most interesting people and go to the most interesting places, so that I can learn at a faster rate to implement ideas and create a system of learning that is a family unit better than anyone else, so that I can ultimately establish my own cities in the manner of Alexander the Great, and then put my children in charge of these cities such that my legacy can live on for 1,000 years. Because this is ultimately the selling point that I use to sell. I mean, it's what I believe in and what my brother believes in, because we both want to go down the leagues of like Alexander. I want to go down the leagues of Alexander the Great, Socrates, Nietzsche. He wants to be counted among Ford and Einstein. I'm thinking more Socrates, Nietzsche, Archimedes, Odysseus, Moses. Like, why not aim for the top? I mean, with God, Christ says, my followers will do greater things than I. And that means either I will accomplish greater things within my lifetime, or I'll serve as a martyr for greater things, in which case my videos, which will be preserved forever, and my writings, which will be preserved forever, though my private writings will not be defiled by anyone who's unworthy, because I won't allow that. Though I can ultimately use my own private writings as inspiration to say, these are the ideas that have moved me the most, in order to make me write them down, which actually causes pain to my hands. I write so much because I know that it causes me to think more about what I write because of that natural limitation, so that the ideas that I express over the longest period of time, which again is ultimately, this is just kind of the concordance of the will of my fathers, which I realize is ultimately God on a mushroom trip, that the will of my fathers is the spirit of my fathers, which revealed itself to me to be ultimately God. And that will is the will of my grandfather, my father expressed through me, who these ideas have come to a T through and a fruition through my enactment out of these ideas, which have now allowed me to become self-aware enough that the ideas have become self-editing through this process of self-awareness that I've enmeshed within my familial structure outside of myself, such that as long as I can maintain this system and this energy, this system will self-perpetuate forever in a system that will ultimately lead to the creation of more efficient systems of gathering the water and minerals and vitamins and foodstuffs that we need for supplements that produce high metabolism, so that I can make grocery stores that ultimately give people foods that ultimately feed their metabolism, because people who have higher metabolism will eat more calories than people with lower metabolisms, so that I have a knowledge that gives me a market share advantage, and that I know what foods provide people with the highest metabolism, so I can make grocery stores that center around giving people foods that provide them with the highest metabolism, that allow me to focus on buying those foods, such that I can corner my niche and then communicate to the niche through the long-term sharing of these ideas, such that by the time these ideas start to become mainstream through the sharing of my video, I've actually already moved beyond the point where I rely on these ideas, because right now my money is coming from the sale of the supplements, to the point where my money will be coming from the eventual sale of groceries and grocery store chains that I'll start throughout the area, and then I'll ultimately provide housing to my employees that's of a better quality, pay my employees more such that people will want to compete to work for me, so that I can provide the highest quality of service at the lowest quality of prices to continue to drive my development of understanding, that I can continue to drive through the development of understanding by forcing myself to educate my own children, by homeschooling them within these co-ops that I'm building within communities in my local area, so that I can ultimately provide a structure in which my brother can ultimately raise his children with greater efficiency, so that he's motivated to stay with me in the company for the longest period of time, because he's ultimately the most talented person I've ever met besides myself, who's the most dedicated and has the least amount of choke within his system. That guy does not know quit. Like, I have seen with, like, he scares me. My brother and I form a natural dichotomy that's very efficient, because I ultimately create ideas and he ultimately implements ideas. And I think I create ideas better than he does. I think he implements ideas better than I do. So I think that it forces me to continuously create more innovative ideas, because at the end of the day, he will implement the ideas that I teach him better than I can. So for me to maintain my older brother advantage, I must always study his and my own implementation and then create the derivative of that in order to get the power law on the optimization of the single thing that I need to focus on the most in order to maintain a competitive advantage over my brother, which in and of itself has actually made me more competitive over a lifetime, which I believe has actually been encoded in my nervous system, which is why I believed I was motivated to have 2 daughters at the same time, even though it's incredibly difficult to do so that they can have the same sort of feedback system and they can continue learning, and then I can create a structure in which people can raise their own children in a homeschooling manner, so they can educate their children in a manner that educates them the most, so that I can have the most educated, motivated people with the most educated, motivated progeny in a Fordian sense. Again, read Ford's work, his book Today and Tomorrow, if you want to understand the future, because again, this guy understood power like no one else. And the more people understand power in this manner, the more people I can work with. Even if you're competing, the fact that you're trying to better yourself is why I don't have enemies, because you trying to selfishly better yourself rather than just destroy both of us out of maliciousness for no apparent reason is ultimately what's going to motivate. That in and of itself is how human beings work together as a synergy. That is what makes us ultimately one body, which itself, when it works selfishly in the Ayn Randian sense, realizes that we learn better by studying our competitors, such that my competitors become my friends, because we need to ultimately be able to defeat the ultimate chaos, which is death. And when we work together, we'll ultimately be able to do that, which we work together by using language and motivational systems that have ultimately been put in place by the incarnation of God, which is why Christ himself did all of the work for us. And our mere selfish acting within these systems with faith in our own ability as human beings made within the image of God allows this natural change that Christ himself enacted as God, that was beyond what any of us could have done, to take place, such that the principles that the Greeks, the Mycenaeans established before the incarnation of God, which read in the incarnation of the Word of God by St. Athanasius, made it so that we can actually unify ourselves within the Logos, which unifies society and people within a beautiful symbiosis, because human beings themselves are not evil and we are not fundamentally broken, but our natural inclinations, when not destroyed, and this is why you shouldn't kill me, fucking elitist bankers, because if you kill me, you're ultimately feeding the decay, because my ability, like, I am ultimately the radical that the structure of society needs, that the inflammation thereof. You study Pete's systems, you study Strong Medicine by Marty Gallagher and this other osteopath. It's sold on Dragon Door. You get the PDF or like through Kindle or whatever. Like, but basically, if you read that, you'll understand that inflammatory molecules like me, like Jesus, are necessary for metabolism. And when you suppress that, like they did in Rome, you suppress metabolism, leading to the end of that metabolic system that ultimately has the structure to maintain the metabolism, and that will ultimately fuel the greater production of intellect, which will allow for the greater production of technologies. That if you're an elitist watching this, you have the attention span, like elitist bankers watching this. If you're watching this, you have the attention span that makes you part of the people who benefit from this, what I'm talking about, and you're competing against those people who do not want to compete against those with attention spans, So they would rather end the entire system rather than allow for the inflammatory molecules to, like myself, to increase the intellectual metabolism of society in a manner that increases the production of crazy ideas like I'm expressing, that will ultimately lead to the production of new technologies and new trade networks, which, if you're one of the people watching this, you'll benefit from. Therefore, implement these ideas, allow other people to make banks, because it will take them multiple generations to do so, by which point you will have already made more banks, so you will benefit more by this, and it will create more competition, which will prevent the elites, the super elites that you're worried about, the people you're worried about, and the things that you're worried about ending your bloodline, are ultimately going to use these ideas to end you several hundred years after you hear them now. And if you do not implement them now, then they will end you several hundred years later, just like they did Rome, because Rome ended the idea and the spread of the succession of these ideas. And right now, if you're watching this, you have really long attention span, so go read The Immortality Key by Brian Morikatsu, because he's ultimately talking about how Christianity is likely, if you read him, St. Athanasius, I don't know, just read him, listen to Terence McKenna, Food of the Gods, read that stuff. It kind of all starts to make sense, because I think the Holy Spirit and the Spirit of Truth itself will just communicate this stuff to you. If you start seeking the truth, I don't think I'm unique in the manner of having these insights. I think I just read the stuff, and I think God, or whatever, the collective God through all of us, that wills the language structure that's come to be, that ultimately gave us the ability to articulate the incarnation of God before the incarnation of God could happen, such that we could understand the incarnation of God as it happens, so that our language structure could incorporate that within itself to produce a language that would be able to articulate the ideas that would lead to the creation of the systems, that would lead to the widespread dissemination of the technologies that will change the lives of the ordinary man in the manner expressed by Henry Ford, such that all of society can increase its production and efficient use of energy, so that we can implement more and more and more ideas to allow for the ever greater realization and spread of the ideas, which will ultimately lead to a system of implementation of the ideas that is not unlike science fiction, which is why I believe science fiction may be the ultimate expression of the ideas, so that if I want to increase the metabolism of the ideas by society, the best thing I can do is use the profits of the business to ultimately produce systems that produce media companies that will ultimately disseminate the ideas of the most important science fiction books of the last 100 years, so that the ideas of the most important science fiction books that are simulating the most important and diverse realities of which human beings can occupy in the future will ultimately become spread throughout society to the common man, so that the common man can understand and combat within his own nervous system, within the spread of the dialogue of society about these ideas through stories, which is the way that human beings understand these things. The understanding of the ideas that leads to the sort of people like Elon Musk, who seem to only be differentiated, and even my father, who seem to only be differentiated by their ability to understand and act on the most distinct and useful ideas of the society that they have emerged from. Because even my father, who is not quite Elon Musk in terms of his productivity, but has not the systems of Elon Musk, because Elon Musk came from a family of wealthy people in the same way that I'm coming from the wealth that my father has produced, such that I'll probably make my father famous in the sense that I am realizing as the ultimate, but he's realizing his father's will and the will of his father before him, who ultimately willed for us to come to the United States, which is the land in which we can realize the production of these ideas, because the country is founded on the will of God, and ultimately founded by people who ultimately believed in the realization of the will of God. And I believe the United States itself, the geography thereof, is actually unique, because the geography of the United States leads to people coming here who actually believe in the uniqueness of the human spirit, which is itself akin to the will of God, such that the people of North America, the further north you go, are actually a more moral people than the people of Central America, who were doing a lot of child sacrifice on the peninsula, because that peninsula ultimately led to the production of a society based on warfare. The geography thereof encouraged certain types of society. If you look at societies in terms of the geography of their warfare, I believe geography to be one of the fields of study that's actually worthwhile, because I think that human behavioral patterns that people observe as race, and that ultimately emerged in the Nazis as a form of racism, that were tried to explain away by Jared Diamond, ultimately are patterns of emergence of human beings moving to different areas based on their belief systems
system, such that you can see people, even in different towns, embodying slightly different variations of different beliefs, because the reasons that they move to those towns are reflected in the psychology of the people, so that the geography of people serves as a sort of TLC plate for the titration of ideas and types of people based on those ideas. The people represent those ideas based on their epigenetics and the expression of those ideas by the behaviors that they engage in that encourage the epigenetic expression and the growth of certain bacteria within their nervous system, by the way the ideas interact with the HPA axis via the entire structure of the brain, the feedback mechanisms of the enactment of these ideas within the structures of society that people ultimately act out, and the enablement of people to understand the ideas, which ultimately lead to the production of greater productivity and the ability of people to centralize their understanding around that productivity, such that it creates households, and households create nations, so that ultimately these nations can be built on truth, which is ultimately the result, the incarnation of God. But this increasing tendency is ultimately the same as the increasing tendency of warfare, because my family even noticed during Thanksgiving that they didn't like that BlackRock was buying up everything, but I told them ultimately that BlackRock is buying up everything because BlackRock is ultimately an expression of the fact that business is simply abstract warfare, which has been going on. And one instantiation of that is how the British bought up all of Ireland and then made it impossible for the Irish to eat anything but potatoes, which then when the potato blight came into practice, because the Irish are selling all their food to the English, because the wealthy landowners of the Irish did that, which motivated the guy who wrote, Jonathan Swift, the guy who wrote Gulliver's Travels, to write the book A Modest Proposal. Ultimately, the reason I'm able to express these ideas as quickly is because it just gives me a lot of joy to express them, because it's leading to my greater articulation, which is leading me to think faster and faster, which is ultimately just increasing the tendency of my brain metabolism over time, which I'm just doing to increase my brain metabolism so I can continue to express these ideas, because it's really hard to actually reach a point of brain metabolism at which my brain is actually producing enough dopamine to the point where it becomes an energy productive task in and of itself. My body has the energy resources to continue to fuel this so that I can actually reach peak of metabolism that reaches a point of bodily health. I do all of this through walks and the proper consumption of the right nutrients, including water, so that I can make enough videos in order to make videos that come out every day, so that I can stop making videos in days that I have low metabolism, because you can go back and I stop making videos that have low metabolism, because it's ultimately kind of depressing, and that leads to, it ultimately just reduces efficiency. So again, this entire thing is a productive system that creates efficiency, that's ultimately expressing the byproduct of this efficiency, which is the result of the will of my genetic line, the will of the genetic line of anyone else in the United States, because your ancestors willed you to come to this land in order to, like, even if you came here via the land bridge or whatever, like everyone in the United States descended from people that ultimately were motivated enough to come here, so that you are ultimately the byproduct of a genetic filter that will enable you to work together to maximize the will of the human spirit through the realization of networking on the land of the United States, such that the more people believe in the will of the United States and believe in the ultimate will of human beings to express these ideas, such that they just productively create in faith, which is ultimately what God encourages us to do throughout the Old and New Testament, and what we are encouraged to do throughout the Odyssey, which is the expression of ultimate faith, and that the man is willing to endure ultimate suffering in order to get home to his family, in order to ensure the production and continuation of the ideas that are ultimately expressed within the continuation of his family unit when they work together, which is ultimately encompassed within the bloodline of the Mycenaeans, which is ultimately something that's been studied by even the Nazis. It's such a powerful idea that the Nazis believe that the Mycenaeans and themselves are ultimately descendants of the Aryan race, and that the Aryan race itself was ultimately the ultimate expression of humanity, because these ideas, which are ultimately realized, I believe, through the consumption of neurotropic substances and neurogenic substances, such as psilocybin, which I consumed, honestly, in the past 6 months in a manner that is completely illegal, because it's illegal in Cambridge, in the United States, in Massachusetts, so I went to Cambridge to consume that, so you have to do that in Cambridge. But basically, if you actually go and do that, then your brain will work better, which will allow you to express these ideas in a way that will allow you to continue to express the ideas of the Western canon, so that you can metabolize the ideas and then enact them in a manner that puts you ahead of the bulk of people, so that you can continue to create innovation that people ultimately will continue to innovate on, which allows for the increase of production, which allows for the increase in population, which supports the big business that Ford talks about today and tomorrow, which ultimately his ideas of business allowed for the creation of hospitals and literally everything. Just go read his books and the cars and everything, which literally changed the entire landscape of the world. We're still living in the productive wake of Ford and the productive people of the past, which is why production has decreased, because we've lost the spirit of these ideas, which is ultimately akin to the spirit of God. And these ideas are ultimately going to come into fruition at the same time, so that we ultimately look back this time period as a great awakening, in the same way that the United States had a great awakening in the past, which preceded an economic boom, because there's no difference between these ideas and the unity of humanity that they produce through inspiration, the fact that people now believe that their bloodline can achieve the highest result outside of the slavery of the lack of new ideas to innovate on, so that they can create greater productivity. Because if there's no greater productivity, then we have to divide up what's already there. And if we can't create greater productivity, then you and I can't work together. If I can't work together with you to create greater productivity, then brothers and families can't work together. And if they can't work together, then we ultimately disperse, and then we end up relying more on the societal bonds, which is no different from slavery, because there's nothing to compete with those societal bonds. But ultimately, language has given us the ability to do this, so that we don't need to die off as a species. We can continue to have faith in our ability to express these ideas through productive speech, and faith in productive speech, and the increase in production that it creates, which makes people of today so much wealthier, such that there are more wealthy people, and the wealthier people of today are even wealthier, so the people with the attention span to follow these ideas will be even wealthier in the future. So everyone listening to the ideas, it is incumbent on them to allow for these ideas to spread, so that these ideas can increase the wealth of everyone in society, so that you ultimately, with your greater resources, can allow yourself to implement and understand these ideas at a greater rate, so that you can outcompete the people who are ahead of you and the systems that are ahead of you and the inevitability of death, so that you can ultimately live forever, and then create systems of people who ultimately live forever. Because I believe even the ancient Greek gods of Olympus understood that without working together, they would not be able to live forever. That's even why the Titans work together. But systems are like within the stories of the people who have ultimately created the civilizations that worked and did not dissipate, there has always been a faith in working together. And when we lose the faith in working together, which motivates people to communicate truthfully, we ultimately deteriorate as a civilization, because everything that creates greater productivity goes away, such that we stop communicating, we stop having faith in communicating, so that if I don't have faith that me telling you my best moves in wrestling will ultimately make me better at wrestling and jiu-jitsu, then I cannot be a part of a martial art that is ultimately superior to all other martial arts, and therefore my martial arts will be inferior, and therefore I will ultimately lose to the martial art that fears not communication of its ideas at the highest level, because that is ultimately what creates the greatest expression of the martial arts, because the peak cannot be greater than its base. And I gotta go in now. But this was awesome.